This is a small patch that I put together. Really, it's my first patch with Tides, the Mutable Instruments tidal modulator, which is a module I've been wanting for years. I first saw it on Lightbath's amazing Loom series of sort of performances and patch walkthroughs, and I thought it looked like a really fun way to just play around like this, just messing around with harmonic ratios, having some fun with just a pretty simple oscillator sound, but crucially, 4 voices, 4 ways of passing that one related signal around and making a piece of music out of it. I really enjoyed it, but never got around to getting it, so finally got myself the Tides, because my system's sort of slowly growing. I'm starting to now enjoy making smaller condensed racks that do one specific thing. This is a fairly multifunctional setup at the moment, but Tides is it. Tides is new, and this is my first patch with Tides. So this is a little bit of how I turned my first experiments into something kind of slightly resembling music. As you can see, I've kind of built in a couple of ways to have some fun with it, make it quite playable actually. So this is, and yeah, there's no keyboards here. I'm just making noises with the oscillators and the ratios and having some fun going crazy with the root notes. So let's kind of kill it all off, let it die away. We'll turn down the effects. We'll turn down the oscillators. And let's start at the very beginning. We've killed everything off. We're starting with Tides. It's got 4 outputs. And we can actually hear what all those outputs sound like individually. You notice it sounds very much like a single tone. And if we look on the scope, we can see that actually these waveforms are locked in place together. They're not exactly in phase, so you do get some sort of a little bit of interest, and we can slightly start to detune slightly and get some interesting textures. But I'm operating Tides obviously as an oscillator, using it in the audio realm, and I'm using the shift level here. I'm not really touching any of the other parameters. I'm just using the shift to play with the harmonic ratios, because as we turn this, we kind of work our way up a major scale in terms of the ratios, but not evenly. It spreads it out. So the 4 voices now will get spread. So the first will stay locked down, and the others will move slowly further away, but in a harmonically pleasing way. And there's a couple of sweet spots in here, just lovely chords that you get from these 4. Here we are at its most extreme, widest spread we've got, and we've essentially got just a nice chord. And each of these individual oscillators is running through. Let's kill that reverb and delay because that might confuse us slightly, but they're all running through there. So the way I've got the patch set up is I've got the top 2 voices set up as drones. So these are now just droning away. There's no change in them. You get some sort of interesting things happen when you get really tight, close harmony, but they're not exactly in sync, wobbling off each other. You get some interesting things there. But I turn that up. This is kind of how I'm playing the main melody of the piece. with these little drones. And then the bottom two voices, I don't have droning. I've got those running rhythmically. So I'm sending a 120 BPM clock out of PAMs, and basically just using PAMs as a start-stop function. So I can play that off and suddenly get a polyrhythm. And polyrhythms tie in nicely to tides. If you have tides in one of the other modes, you can use it almost as a polyrhythm generator. But what I've got here is I'm sending my basic clock, my 120 BPM clock, into Pachinko, which is a marbles clone. So we've got a kind of Mutable Instruments vibe going on here. And I'm taking out a super fast version of that clock into my Shackmat Time Apprentice, which I'm using as a clock divider, because that's what it is. So this is actually the speed of the clock pulse that's coming through Pachinko and into the divider. So then I'm dividing that down into a 3-on-4 rhythm. So you get that kind of Fake Empire by the National vibe. It's just a really pleasing pulse that just clicks with me somehow, and I really enjoy that. So that's kind of forming the bass line, and as we turn the knob, we get the consistency of that first voice, which is locked to the root note, never really changes, just bouncing around on its 3 pattern, and then the 4 on top of it changes as we turn up, but it's really reasonably limited in its movement, so it works nicely as a bass line. And then when we bring in the drones again on top of that, you can see how we're starting to get the beginnings of a kind of a melody and a bass line from one module. It's just great. This is one of the things that's making me really glad I got tides, and I'm sure I'm going to use it a lot in a lot of patches. So this basic setup is just to get to this playable nature, and I can mess around with the tides waveform a little if I want. You almost get some kind of filtering effects by playing around with the slope, and what we're doing is just changing the shape of the wave. But I like it, and the reasonably basic triangle, slightly rounded off triangle, gives us a lot of scope for playing around. And then, of course, on top of that, we've got the pulse, which I can stop and start. So that gives another element of playability, of structuring a performance around it. And then we start to add loads of effects on top. First and foremost of which is the morphogene. And I'm using the morphogene. I've got it set. I've got recorded a 2-3 second reel. But then I've hit record again, so now it's in sound on sound mode, and I can just bring in the sound on sound. So if I actually kill the pulse, we can kind of almost hear what's going on a bit more. See, rather than just that steady tone, we're starting to get extra pitches. So on the morphogene, I've got just using a very slow couple of oscillators out of LFOs out of Oct. So that's just triangle wave modulation, going to gene size and slide. So what that's doing is it's taking the recorded buffer and just changing the amount that gets played back, and then moving the start point. So that whole buffer moves up and down around, and I've got morph all the way up, so that we suddenly start getting seeded into our normal playback from morphogene. We get other pitches, so that's the bit that really kind of starts to bring it to life. It's you start to get fifths, and I think, is it fourths and fifths or fifths and thirds? Either way, I think it's fourths and fifths because it's reasonably neutral tonality, so it just gives us an extra bit of texture, which is really good fun. And then on top of all that, which is better demonstrated by the pulses, is mimeophone, which is acting as a delay. It's in one of its slower zones. So if we put in a pulse there, you can just sort of start to hear it coming back. It's reasonably subtle, but part of that is we've got the color turned way down to the really kind of muffled, low pass filtery kind of zone. So if we turn that up, you can probably hear the difference a bit better. There we go. You see, that was the echo coming back. So it's quite a long time, and I've kind of skewed it slightly, but not too much. Basically, morphogene and mimeophone, I'm not even modulating mimeophone, I'm just leaving them as they are. And then the other bit of effects I've got is just a little bit of end of chain polish on here is the effects aid, which is just set to it's an unclocked delay going into a reasonably kind of spacey reverb, which just adds a little bit of extra presence and space to the whole thing, ties all the different elements together. And that's the basic oscillator sound that we're getting. Reasonably subtle in terms of effects, but it gives a nice kind of granular texture underneath, which I think is quite nice. The next piece of the puzzle, which is kind of coming along separately, is where we bring pachinko into play. And so pachinko, what it normally does is it generates a set of connected melodies. Because I've got it clocked so fast, we've actually got out of the Y output here, through here, we've just basically got a stream of madness. It's a whole load of random pitches, basically a random. And if I shove that into the volt per octave input for tides, which changes the root note. So at the moment, everything is anchored on that one root note. I wonder if I kill the effects, it might be a little clearer what's happening. If we change that root note very, very quickly, we get it sounds almost like an arpeggio. It's a really nice little kind of pulsing rhythm. And because it's the melody coming out of pachinko is really wide, so we've got loads of really low notes, loads of really high notes, all mixed together, creating a kind of crazy randomness. So that's one bit of sort of playable modulation. I just can pull it in and out with the cable. Steady root note, crazy root note. Nice and easy. The other level of that is I'm taking one of the more tempered, not in a musical sense, just in a kind of scale sense, attenuated might be better, outputs. So we're still getting musically connected to the pulse changes, and I'm bringing those into the shift level. So this knob here is the shift knob. And at the moment I've got it plugged in permanently, and it's not doing anything because the attenuator is at 0. But if I turn the attenuator up, it's as if we're turning this knob very quickly. So that works as just a little bit of extra spice between making big changes, a little bit of random on top, make another slow big change, bit of random on the top. And that doesn't change the root note, but it does change the harmony and the kind of chord structure that we're getting out. So those are the building blocks of that first patch. And let's put it all together and see how it sounds. See, we've still got a little bit of the delay filtering through mimeophone because it's on quite a slow, plenty of repeats. So let's kill that right off, let that die down. Turn up all our effects, but not all the way up, just enough to kind of subtly affect the sound. And then we can kind of begin a performance. There you have my first patch with tides. It's great fun. This is quite simple. I'm going to try and expand on this over the next few days before I unpatch everything. Leave it patched for a little bit, maybe bring in some rhythm, some kind of extra voices perhaps, but I just think that's a really nice little compact thing by itself. Really enjoying tides. Should not have waited 2 years to get it since I first discovered it. Really pleased. We'll recommend this again. We'll be using it in the future patches for sure.